Okay, we'll talk now about twisted architecture. It's a theme that is quite contemporary, so to speak, and let's see why. We'll look at some examples, but I think all of them, this obvious twisting that takes place in architecture or took place in architecture recently, and it continues to animate architecture, must have a reason. Why is it that architects contemplated a twisted architecture and they built accordingly? For example, this tower proposed for Austria by MVRDV. MVD, I think I wrote wrongly there. MDRDV. Look at this. Look at this tower. Why was it? It was not built, but it was proposed by a very accomplished architecture office in this way. Obviously, with some structural complications, with the financial efforts that such a twisting would infer. So why was it done? Like, my question is, and this is not a single example. I have plenty of examples in this presentation with twisted architectures, and we are going to advance. An elegant twist art by Big and Allard architecture. It's another twisted building. In a project, of course, Big employs twisting rather often, and we are going to see also the Twist Museum that he built in Norway. Sorry about this model. Now again, Bjarke Ingels in Vancouver, Canada. Probably this building was built. I prepared this presentation before the construction began, but this building. It's a building which almost became the curtain of a theater, on the stage of a theater, which empties, which creates some space for contemplating the city of Vancouver as you approach it. That was a justification, but in essence, I think is about something else. This twisting is a constant, not just in the work of Bjarke Ingels and Big, but in the work of many architects. And we are going to see some examples, and not the only ones. Big designs with a twist in Miami. The Danish architects raised the bar for Miami condos with a truly innovative design. This is a text I took from somewhere. This was built as well. And, this obviously required supplemental financial efforts, and accordingly, the twisting created structural difficulties, but there was a need apparently for problematizing the prism. And here we read what's behind the trend for twisting skyscrapers. New report ranks 28 twisting scrapers in the world right now and explains why there are many more to come. Diane Tower in Dubai, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, twisted itself, as you can see. Then twisting torso, Malmo, Santiago, Calatrava. This was a building that was built many years ago, maybe about 25 years ago, if not more, in Malmo, in Sweden. And it's in my opinion, one of the better buildings by Santiago Calatrava. Then the Diamond Tower, Jeddah. Look at this, twisting and spirals. F&F Revolution Tower in Panama. Twisting, there is the expression about twisting truth, which is not a good thing to do. But why is it that some architects and some very important architects indulge in twisting their buildings? Green 8 Concept Berlin by two Polish architects. It was not built, it was a proposal. The report says the trend will be around for some time due to its green-friendly nature. Sorry about the translate. I guess it was translated. The text: twisting buildings can reduce energy consumed in the building via the more varied opportunities for displacement of the windows. This is nonsense. That's not why people twist buildings. No. This is, you see, this how architects are. They try to justify, with wrong reasons, preferences that have to do with other roots. Just don't twist your neck looking up at them now. The singing, ringing tree. Let's look at this one. A 3-meter tall wind-powered musical sculpture made of galvanized steel pipes. It stands high above the English town of Burnley. The pipes swirl to form the shape of a tree, bent and blown by the wind, and produce an eerie, melodious hum as the constant wind on Crown Point drifts through them. I don't like usually to read too much during my presentation. Here is the sculpture. Now, this is not really architecture, it's a sculpture, but again, we see the whirling longing of the architect or the sculptor, the artist. Why the twisting? There must be a reason for it, and I don't think this reason has to be discovered, can be discovered in the field of pragmatic reasoning, like, that it is economical. No, quite the opposite. It's not economical at all. I'm not talking about this sculptural work. I'm talking about, grown-up buildings, so to speak, which twist and twist and twist. Twisted timber shell wraps around the parking attendant's pavilion in France. This is twisted, just a little bit, so to speak, but it's still twisted. It's a box that was deformed by twisting, and you can see clearly especially on the left wall. Why the need for it? This is my question. Why can't we just build, let's say, like Palladio or straight walls? Why do we need to slant them? Why do we need to twist them? Or why do so many architects today feel like doing it? There must be a reason. If you are not careful, this building you could almost approximate as being a box. And it is a box, but you see at the perimeter line that it is a twisted box, which obviously complicated matters, but it seems the architects enjoyed this complication and needed it. Digital models and augmented reality used to build twisting pavilion in Tallinn. Now this one is more radical, very much so. Look at this. It's a pavilion. Okay, I understand. It's an architecture that doesn't have all the constraints of a typical building. But again, why would the architects do something like this? I mean, we are accustomed to this architecture or to this architecture, but not to this. This is an extravagant architectural gesture, and you wonder, why was it done in this way? Does it have a vibration? If I am to refer to the tingling word that I mentioned previously, is it a pleasure to assume the difficult, the controversial, the turbulent, I mean, Mark Wigley, when he was dean at Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, did write almost a manifesto towards turbulence. He welcomed turbulence. Well, we see a turbulence here, but why the need for it? But no one would say that this is not interesting, it's not inciting, it's not provocative. It is. But why the need for it? Is it mainly, the quest for the unknown? Now, here we look at the Timber Expo in Birmingham that is twisted. I think it was done by the students of the Architectural Association in London. And here again, we see this obvious twisting. Why the need for it? This is a very recent work of the students at the Architectural Association in London. Very rigorous, it was constructed beautifully, but expressing this desire to sabotage linear thinking. And yes, the new technologies can help us do such things. But how do we negotiate between such things and the need for sustainability and all the other, worries that we have today, not just about architecture, but also about the way we live on this earth? Just a few days ago, I received a message from Stephen Hall Architects that their office or Stephen Hall has an exhibition in Italy called Half World. And I read there that apparently someone wrote a book about how we could save the planet or could save the world by allocating half of the world to nature. In other words, to empty half of the world of the presence of the humans, and the humans to live just on half of the world. And now we see these structures which mimic in a way or try to become somehow organic. And this organicity, maybe it's a reclaimed organicity is an attempt to reclaim the natural through what is, even in an abstracted way, organic. It seems obvious to me that, as opposed to Heidegger and Le Corbusier, about whom I talked earlier, each one of them living at least for, Le Corbusier only lives several months a year, and he's Le Cabanon, and Heidegger lived in Heidegger's hut, a very humble rectangular little house. Here we see the architects almost exasperated by the little box or the little house or the little room and trying to break free from it. Against a landscape of hills lies the beautiful Twine, a concept house under a twisting stream of concrete designed by Anthony Gibbon Design. Together with the mountains, this impressive house, resembling a gray DNA chain, creates a series of organic forms. Now here I'm not sure the house was built. It looks to me like a rendering, but even as a rendering should make us think. Why would an architect, contemplate building something that is, that would require some, investments at all levels? something like this in our time, which is confronted with many crises. Again, the icebergs are melting, the sea levels are rising, pollution is high, the climate is changing, and yet we build extravagant things, twisted. Opulence. I mean, what we look at here is much bigger than the whole little house that Heidegger and his wife had, and obviously incomparably bigger than the Le Cabanon by Le Corbusier. Studio Gang completes a new twisting tower in San Francisco. Here it is, built. Now, again, you would ask yourself, why go through that trouble? Well, Studio Gang already showed an interest in agitating the prism or the box with the Agua Tower in Chicago. And here is a different attempt, but somehow in the same spirit, to rebelliously react to serene prism. The interior, though, is very bourgeois and yes, cozy and comfortable and so on. What can I say? Very different from the interior of Le Cabanon by Le Corbusier or Heidegger's hut. But the exterior has tremor. That's why I thought of the word dindling, because it is animated by other forces than the forces of reason. And again, there seems to be a contradiction between the cozy comfort of the interior and the discomfort of the twisted facades or the twisted volume of the building. There is instability towards the outside and maybe excessive stability inside. So this was built in San Francisco by Jeannie Gang and her office. The Twist Museum by Big in Norway, which you most surely know. Why did he twist it? And he twisted it exactly or almost exactly in the middle of the river underneath. Exactly where normally a bridge would be most challenged, he twisted the building, maybe to evoke some kind of after all, in the middle of the building or in the middle of a bridge, you move from one condition, meaning one side of the river, to the other side of the river. So it's like crossing a threshold. And exactly there, he twisted the building, and it was built just as you see it, in a beautiful landscape. The interior, though, it's a museum. In my opinion, excessively wide, but that's because art didn't yet arrive. And yes, the destabilizing force belongs to the artist. But in this case, belongs also to the architect. Yes, there is extreme rigor and it is executed impeccably, but those white walls inside do need art, do need color, do need the gestures of the so-called irresponsible artist. Yet the twisting belongs to the architect. This is not a rendering, it's a picture of the built work. And this is the conceptualization, so to speak, of Mr. Ingalls. Building museum, the prism on the left, and infrastructure bridge, the second, and then art and sculpture, bringing in disorder. And then he says he arrived at the art bridge, where you have reason and reaction to reason mingle. We propose a hybrid of architecture, infrastructure, and sculpture, bridging art and nature, he said, they said. World first twisting tower is made from timber that bends itself into shape. Now, what I read about the next example is that apparently at the University of Stuttgart, they experimented with a wood that would deform itself in the action of losing its moisture, and they were doing research in order to obtain these deformations, these twistings of wood, based on what actually the wood itself would perform. So this was not twisted by man, it was the twisting that the constructive elements arrived at in the process of wood losing its moisture. A rather complicated article I read about it. And so it's an interesting way of building with these large pieces of wood that became like this. Well, it's a little bit paradoxical because the architects or the engineers claim that it was wood that became like this without the architects or the engineers forcing the form on wood. But it's not quite like this. You can tell that this was influenced by the will of the architects and the engineers, even if the curvatures themselves happened in the organic life of the wood. I mean, even if it appears to be, so-called naturally twisted, but in my opinion, the volition, the will of the architects and the engineers and the manufacturers was still very present. You see the scale of these wooden pieces is quite big. I only regret that some big and maybe many trees were cut in order to build this tower. This is certainly not what we should do these days, to cut more trees and more trees and more trees in order to build our extravagant, towers or who knows what. I mean, this tower was built on the corpses of some trees, perhaps big trees and many trees. Building with wood that bends itself into shape. This is what refers to what we just saw. And, behind this was, or I don't know. I mean, I read that this tower was actually built by the University of Stuttgart, but here, actually, I see a different school of architecture, the one in Zurich, ETH, a very important architecture school. Maybe they experiment also with the wood that bends itself into shape. But when I read these words, I'm a little bit worried because, it looks like the wood all by itself bends itself into a shape which it is not wood that desires, but us, the humans. So I don't think the will of the humans is not yet in a bothering way still very much present. And here we see, all kinds of illustrations that try to explain rationally. But what such a scheme doesn't say is that the continuous assault that human beings do on nature. We twist our buildings, but we do so mimicking so-called organic effects by continuing to sacrifice nature. Now, what is this? This is a metal cube to house. I think this is the last work that I show in this short presentation about rather large and complex subject. Mart Architekten in Austria builds distorted metal cube to house Austrian art gallery, twisted itself. And here it is. And yes, it's true. This is the role of art, to make the bourgeois uncomfortable, to problematize things, to make, to bring trouble in a way. You know, but without this trouble, life would be very impoverished. That's why we need art badly. Art is, you know, deviant by its very nature, and this building also is deviant. And I think it's well done. A twisted cube clad in zinc armor forms the State Gallery of Lower Austria, designed by Mart Architekten in the town of Krems. The art gallery's form is created by a stack of square floor plates that have been rotated around two concrete cores as they move up the building, twisting to face both the Danube River and the historic center of Krems. And here it is. In my opinion, it is a good building, impeccably executed and conceived with a sense of playfulness, which we are glad to witness. I wonder what the people around this building think and feel, but they are probably accustomed to some eccentricities coming from architects and artists and so on. It's probably also a well-to-do place, you know, having no trouble to invest in such aesthetical experiments. But the reason I included this work in this presentation is because of the twisting. Why do we need these days to distort the cube? Why aren't we happy with a, you know, placidly conceived, I almost said classically, but maybe placidly is better said, a cube, as it comes down to us from, you know, geometry. Why do we need to make it deviant? Why do we need to distort it? Why do we need to twist it? Thank you.